afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our last in a series of lectures on, for Learning Health System Month. Today, I am very, very pleased to introduce to you Dr. Michael Seid. He is a professor at the University of Cincinnati School of Medicine in the Department of Pediatrics, and serves as the Director of Health Outcomes and Quality of Care Research in the Division of Pulmonary Medicine. And he also has an appointment in the James Anderson Center for Health Systems Excellence at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. What is interesting for me about Dr. Seid is his use of behavioral and social science to really try and understand how to get the right treatment to the right person at the right time, but really sort of focusing on collaborative learning systems. And he's going to sort of define what that means. He did a fair amount of work in this area with his Transformative Research Award from the NIH, where they designed and tested, he and his colleague Peter Margolis, designed and tested a new system for transforming chronic care. With the Improved Care Now, I guess that is a learning collaborative. And so since then, they have worked on more or an additional sort of 12 learning health networks, so not them, but there have been more learning health networks that have developed and have been shown to develop and improve health outcomes. And so he's going to talk to us a little bit about these kinds of approaches to improving health outcomes. And with that, it's all yours, Michael, so take it away.
Great, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here today. As Allison said, my name is Michael Seid. I am a behavioral and social scientist. I got my PhD in psychology, but I don't lead with that because then people wonder what a psychologist who doesn't see patients does doing research in a hospital. And I tell them, and this is actually the way I think about it, is that healthcare is a human system. The healthcare system is a human system. It has technology in it, it has data in it, but fundamentally it's people working together. And I see the science behind changing healthcare as a behavioral and social science. And I'm going to talk with you about some of what we've done with collaborative learning health systems, how we think about them, and hopefully it will be helpful to you on your journey as well. So brief disclosure, I am one of several inventors, owners of intellectual property that's licensed by CCHMC to Hive Networks, which is a for-profit company that provides software and services to support learning networks. Acknowledgements are very, very many, primarily the faculty, staff, patients, and families of all of the learning networks that we work with. Two collaborators, Peter Morris and David Hartley, have been very instrumental in the development of some of these ideas, and we've been lucky enough to be funded by a variety of federal and foundation grants. So today, kind of covered these main points, that learning health networks are communities that facilitate the co-production of health and healthcare at scale, that there are social science insights, how to grow and optimize these, that there's a framework for understanding and improving learning health networks. It's referred to here as the AOA, the actor-oriented architecture. And then I'll share some lessons learned, that may be helpful as you continue your journey. So this next slide, I was asked at one point, why do you need 3 citations to prove that 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25? The citations are not about the math. The citations are about the substance behind the math. And really what this is about is that patients do about half of what it takes to stay healthy, and clinicians deliver about half of indicated care. Now these citations are a little old, but I don't think we've moved that much off the mark. So that means if you multiply these together, people are getting about a quarter of what's necessary and required. It's not that nobody cares. It's not that any physician gets up in the morning and says, I'm only going to give my patients half of what they need, or that patients wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to take half my meds. No, and it's not that nobody has good ideas. Everybody has good ideas. What we don't have is a system for harnessing the inherent information and collective intelligence of everybody living and working in the healthcare system. And that was the motivation behind our Transformative Ro1 that we received from the Director's Office of the NIH in 2009, which was really the spark for this journey. We asked, what if we could create a vastly better chronic care system by harnessing the inherent motivation and collective intelligence of patients and clinicians? And what if this system allowed patients and physicians to share information, collaborate to solve problems, and use their collective creativity and expertise to act in ways that improve health? Shortly thereafter, the National Academy of Medicine, which was the Institute of Medicine, released the findings from their series of roundtables, the learning healthcare system. We all are now familiar with this idea, and there are several. I just did a short search on the internet looking at different places who have adopted this, from Michigan, from HRQ, from Duke, and there are others. Whoops! Wow. Okay. So the way that we've focused on with this learning health system idea is on these what we call learning health networks, and we started with Improved Care Now, and as Allison said, we've replicated these across different chronic conditions. We've replicated them in perinatal care, in safety, and in community health. These are just 4 examples of results. This is Improved Care Now. This is the percentage of, or the proportion of kids in Improved Care Now in remission with inflammatory pediatric IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, or ulcerative colitis. Started with 7 sites and about 60% on average in remission, and now there are 110 sites. It's about 83% remission rate. This is the mortality rate for kids with hypoplastic left heart syndrome in NPC-QIC, National Pediatric Quality in Improvement Consortium, perinatal, or no, sorry, I shouldn't put, anyway, I forget the name, NPC-QIC, sorry, but you can see that this is these are kids who are born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. There's a series of surgeries that they undergo, and this is the mortality rate between surgeries. What we found out was that kids weren't growing adequately in between surgeries, and so by implementing specific interventions, we were able to decrease that. These are catheter-associated UTIs in Solutions for Patient Safety, a very large patient safety collab. And this is the rate of scheduled preterm scheduled cesareans at 37 weeks, so essentially preterm scheduled cesareans in Ohio and across perinatal care. So we've replicated this phenomena over and over. We are able now to set up and run collaboratives, large-scale collaboratives that achieve outcomes. And we now have, depending on how you count, either 12 or 16 of these learning health networks. That's a great start. And the question really for me now is, how can we scale these? And how can we optimize these? Because there aren't 16 rare diseases, there are 7,000 rare diseases. Why should these 16 conditions have a learning health network and other kids have access to them? And so part of answering that question involves answering the question, why do these work? And how might we make them work better and at larger scale? And that's the research that I do. And you know, when we first started this, we were like, what is going on here? Jochen Benkler, one of who's a legal scholar at Harvard Law School, says it's not intuitive that thousands of volunteers could beat big companies, but they do. And in fact, these are all voluntary organizations. These are clinics across a variety of different academic and non-academic hospitals and outpatient care centers that might in other areas compete. We in Cincinnati compete with Nationwide Children's up the road in Columbus. We have billboards on I-71 going north, they're all about Cincinnati Children's. Going south, they're all about Nationwide, right? Just in case you want to turn around. And so there's intense competition, but for inflammatory bowel disease, pediatric IBD, for example, we don't compete. We want them to do as well as possible. If we know something that's going on, we want them to steal it. If they know something something better to do, we want them to share it. And that is because we are collaborating together. And so what is going on here? This is when we talk about learning and the learning healthcare system, the question is like, who should be learning? This is really, the difference in models between Microsoft and Carta and Wikipedia. Many of you might be old enough to remember Microsoft and Carta. This was Microsoft's attempt to create the first online encyclopedia. And what did they do? They bought Grolier's encyclopedia. They hired thousands of professional editors, and they essentially developed a professional encyclopedia that you could get on discs, and they would mail it to your house. Eventually, after a while, you could update it online. And then there's Wikipedia, which is essentially, volunteers that have created the world's biggest online encyclopedia. In fact, if you Google Microsoft Encarta, which I did just earlier this week, the first entry is in fact the Wikipedia entry, and it says that Microsoft, published Encarta from 1993 to 2009. And you can say, you can also find out if it's still available, et cetera. It's not available. It was outcompeted by something that was better and free. So how does this work? Well, there's a lot of science to explain why this should happen. And I kind of liken this to the basic science behind healthcare systems. We know that there's basic science behind biological systems, right? It's chemistry, it's biology, it's physiology, it's anatomy, medicine. but there's also basic science behind healthcare systems, clinical epidemiology, psychology, sociology, organizational dynamics, political science, economics, statistics, informatics, improvement science. There's a variety of social and behavioral sciences and other sciences. I would include the complexity sciences in here as well. So when we started actually looking into the science behind this, we kind of came across what we eventually refer to as our Hall of Champions, a variety of people from different disciplines who collectively inform this work. So, for example, Martin Nowak, who's at the Department of Evolutionary Biology and Mathematics at Harvard University, explained and created formulas essentially to explain the evolution of cooperation. Why should people cooperate? Well, it has to do with these different situations, and you can actually make math out of it. David Sloan Wilson is a biologist and an evolutionary biologist who looked at multi-level selection. So his quote, selfishness beats altruism within groups. If you're selfish in a group, you'll beat out people who are not, but altruistic groups beat selfish groups. Everything else is commentary. So, and because humans evolved to, live in tribes, altruistic tribes beat the selfish tribes. And so he has, it's sort of baked into us. And not only that, but culture can evolve. Evolutionists work on both culture and behavior. Elinor Ostrom was a Nobel Prize winning political scientist who wrote about governing common pool resources. You may have heard of The Tragedy of the Commons. Garrett Hardin in 1968 published in Science magazine an essay that basically says, we can't cooperate because there's this tragedy of the commons, that if you have a common pool resources, say, like a commons in a village where people can graze their sheep, everybody will be incentivized to graze one extra sheep or maybe two extra sheep just to get a bigger flock. Well, what does that do? It overgrazes the commons, the common pool resource collapses, all the sheep die, it's a tragedy. And Ostrom took a look at that and said, yeah, that would happen if nobody talked. But there are design principles for making sure that you can manage these common pool resources sustainably. So there are ways that you can set these up so that there isn't a tragedy of the commons, that there's actually an ongoing commons. Jochen Benkler, who I mentioned earlier, is a legal scholar at Harvard and talks about, he wrote this book that I would recommend to anybody called The Wealth of Networks. It's sort of a play on Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And he talks about the distribution of the means of production of information, knowledge, and know-how. So it used to be that if you wanted it to write a book, launch a TV show, film a movie, record a song, you needed a studio or a printing press or a recording studio. Well, now we all have, you can't see it because of the background, we all have these printing presses and studios in our pockets. We've distributed the means of production. Anybody can write a book or put a video out. And not only that, but they are doing this a lot of times for non-market reasons. People will do things sometimes in spite of not being paid, or perhaps even because of not being paid. The implication being, with the right system, everyone can be part of producing information, knowledge, and know-how for improving. Deming was an American engineer and statistician who is, I think, most well known for helping the Japanese to dominate the car market, and his quality methods were behind Toyota and others. He had a lot of insights, and one of the components of his system of profound knowledge is psychology. And essentially, he said, people want to do a good job. They are influenced by management, and they will resist. So if anybody who's worked with humans knows, people don't necessarily listen to you. But there are ways to organize organizations that make it more likely that people can and will cooperate. And Øystein Feldstad, who's in at Norwegian School of Business, proposed that there are ways that organizations can be architected, if you will, organized so that that facilitates collaboration. So he called it an actor-oriented architecture. People who have shared purpose and the capabilities and values to self-organize, if you have that, and a way to create and share resources, and ways that enable shared processes that enable peer-to-peer collaboration. So in other words, if I have a problem and I am motivated and able to organize, if I can find other people who have a similar problem or have a similar interest to me, and have ways of working with them, then we can create resources together that we can use to solve our problem and also share with the broader community. That is an architecture for collaborative organizations. So a note about architecture. Architecture matters, right? So you can have an architecture on the left that is typical hierarchical architecture, and you can have something that is more organic or complex, and so let me talk a little bit more about shared purpose, shared resources, and shared processes as we've applied that to learning health networks. The first I'll talk about shared purpose, and we spent a lot of time trying to understand the people involved in the IBD ecosystem, if you will, when we were developing the prototype collaborative learning health network, Improved Care Now, and we did some ethnographic research to develop personas, sort of composite people, based on our observations and our interviews, and this is one, Bianca, who is not her real name. She's composite representation of patients who has inflammatory bowel disease, but she's in college now. She's a young adult. She's been through the system. She wants to give back, to be a leader in the IBD community. She has the motivation to contribute and the lived experience to make contributions valuable. And in fact, this was a breakthrough discovery for us. It was an aha moment that there are people out there who want to cooperate and to make a difference. And if you could redesign the system to allow them to do this, then you might be able to actually harness the inherent motivation of thousands of Biancas and maybe several thousands Mr. and Mrs. Simmons out there. So that was an aha moment for us. And since then, we've had literally hundreds of people who we were like, aha, this is Bianca. True story. There is a actual Bianca on one of the student or one of the patient advisory councils, which we got a tickle out of. But here's another example. This is Breck, who in 2009 became a mom to a child with CF. She attended the CF Learning Network design sessions in 2015. I was at her table. And during a break, she turned to me and said, I don't even know what I'm doing here. What do I have to offer? I said, speak about what you know, because we need your voice. We need everybody to collaborate here. And she did that. And she was part of the reason why the CF Learning Network picked health-related quality of life as one of its main outcomes. It started off, okay, everybody knows that for CF, we care about lung function and nutrition. Turns out that wasn't actually the case. We also care about quality of life. She stayed involved and recognized that the network needed to have patient and family partners, not just attending QIT meetings at care centers, but actively participating. So the chart at the top right shows how she tracked her efforts to increase engagement overall. And in 2018, she attended our CCHMC's intermediate improvement skills series. She got improvement skills training, and her project was to increase the number of patient and family partners involved at the network level. So over the course of 20 weeks, she almost doubled the number and increased their level of engagement. Breck is now the co-chair of the network leadership team. So she helps to run the CF Learning Network, and she's leading the work on health-related quality of life measures. She's also teaching other networks how to involve patients and families. So we've developed pathways for patients and families to become partners and leaders as a way of making it more likely that people will participate. Another example, and I've said real life Biancas exist. These are Sammy and Jenny, who were co-chairs of the Improved Care Now Patient Advisory Council. These young women both have ostomies, and they recognized that living with an ostomy was something that their clinicians literally had no firsthand experience of. So they wrote a guide for considering or living with an ostomy. They had it reviewed by clinicians. They shared it with the community. And this toolkit is now available to any child in Improved Care Now considering an ostomy. Fun facts, Sammy is now finishing her pediatric residency. Jenny just got her first job as a pediatric psychologist, which, is pretty impressive. But as they reminded us during a plenary that they gave at an Improved Care Now community conference, and I quote, "We started out as regular girls, but we interacted with a system that developed us as leaders." So we've designed systems that systematically develop leaders. Just to drive the point home, at the same time that Jenny and Sammy released the ostomy toolkit, the community was developing and contributing these interventions and ideas. Pre-visit planning videos, group visit models, speak out video, master reliance agreement, a design for a clinical trial. What happens when you make it easy for people to get together and contribute? They start to solve problems you didn't even know existed. They will bring solutions to the community that we didn't even know we needed. So in addition to a shared purpose, and by the way, the shared purpose is driven by focus on outcomes. This is not about anything other than making sure that at a population level, the kids in these learning health networks, people in these learning health networks have the best outcomes. In addition to having a shared purpose, it's useful to have a commons. Now, I mentioned that Jenny and Sammy put together the ostomy toolkit. It's one of these, here it is, the ostomy toolkit, one of several toolkits and guides and other resources on the Improved Care Now website. There are other commons. We have both online commons in addition to the website. We had a learning exchange. We're now transitioning to another platform. We also have quality improvement reports and offline commons, right? Action period calls, learning labs, community conferences where people get together. So we're creating and we're sharing and people have access to a variety of resources. Not only these kinds of resources, but data as well. The fundamental knowledge piece. This is what we call it in-once registry, where research level data are collected as part of clinical care. It requires people to get together to figure out what data they want to collect, how they want to store it and chunk it, and then to make the workflow follow the or make the data collection follow the workflow rather than the other way around. And then when you have when you have data, so right now, learning network care centers that have this data in once, instead of they chart, and as a result of charting, data elements go into the registry, and then that goes to their EHR, Epic, or whatever, and also goes to the network registry. And then when you have that, you can develop clinical tools, pre-visit planning tools, or population management tools. So here's an example, for Improved Care Now, we have a variety of different reports, automated reporting. This is a pre-visit planning tool that was developed by IROC, the Improving Renal Outcomes Collaborative. This was kids who are on, who have had a kidney transplant. So what do you need to know in order to make sure that these kids continue to be successful with their kidney transplant? So at the clinical level, you have this sort of situational awareness. You can also roll that up and have a shared situational awareness at the network level. So back to Improved Care Now, these are reports, sort of a network level dashboard of a variety of different indicators that people can look at and say, how are we doing as a whole for this learning network? What do we need to do? We can also display those in run charts. I won't get into the details of these, but just to reiterate that these shared resources, both the people developed ones and the data, are key for organizing in this way. Then you need shared processes, right? I said shared purpose, shared resources, shared processes. So one key shared process is this notion of co-production. This comes from a variety of folks, including Paul Batalden and others. Healthcare is not something that is given from an expert to a customer. You can't go in and buy a unit of health like you can a toaster or a TV, right? It's shared work. It requires producing together. This notion of co-production requires us to work with families as partners, not for families as customers. And so that's one sort of shared process. We all understand that this is the way that we work together. Another shared process is we teach everybody to do quality improvement. So we teach them the model for improvement, which is on the left here, consists of essentially 3 questions. What are we trying to accomplish? Question 1, how will we know that change is an improvement? Question 2, what change can we make that will result in an improvement? And then we do a lot of learning together, plan, do, study, act cycles, PDSA cycles. The beauty of this now is if I have a thing that I want to change and I'm looking for people to collaborate with me, and they ask me, well, how are you thinking about question 1? I know what they're asking. We don't have to go through, like, how do we approach a problem? We know how to approach a problem. It's using the model for improvement. We have a shared language, a shared process. Then on the right, rather, is a key driver diagram. It's just a way of laying out your theory of change. If we want to get here, what are the things that have to happen, and how do we make those things happen? So again, if we're forming teams to make improvements, we can say, here, I've got a key driver diagram, and everybody goes, oh, great, not, oh, what? Right? So, and we teach the clinicians how to do this. We teach the parents and the patients how to do this. In All Children Thrive, which is the community learning health network, we taught teachers how to do this, and they taught their kids how to do it. We had third graders doing PDSAs on their reading. At Cincinnati Children's, just as an aside, we do this broadly. We have a lot of effort that goes into this kind of quality and improvement and research education. You can see 11,400 QI modules that were completed. 1,500 people gone through our rapid cycle improvement collaboratives. So just as a way of showing, the effort that is required to get everybody following these shared processes. So shared purpose, shared resources, shared processes. Let me show you some of the ways that we are now instrumenting and trying to understand how to improve that across learning networks. So this is a study that we did in 2018 and 2019, where we looked at changes in the actor-oriented architecture over time. And it's hard to read. I don't expect you to to follow each one, but we showed that Improved Care Now made intentional change to involve more people, to involve more sharing, and to make it easier to form teams. We also measured engagement in Improved Care Now. We haven't put these together yet, but we define engagement as being part of the learning network to create and share resources, and so you can have different levels of engagement. And we developed an ontology of behaviors that we can then say that, well, this type of behavior is awareness or contribution, and you can assign these tags to individuals and aggregate over time and over population, so we can show for Improved Care Now overall what the level of engagement is. We can show for an individual person what their engagement journey is over time. We've also looked at the processes that are required to run learning networks. This is, and we created what we call a maturity grid assessment, or a network maturity grid. This is a set of processes in 6 different domains that when you can rate yourself as being mature in all these different processes, in all these domains, then you have a mature learning network. That is more likely to lead to better outcomes. But by doing this, we can then also look at comparisons across learning networks. When we start to look across learning networks, now we can start to compare and learn. We can look at across learning networks over and within learning networks over time. And so I showed you these charts at the very beginning. These are the outcomes curves for several of the learning networks. Now we can overlay these network maturity grid self-assessments and look at the different shapes, if you will, the different ratings of the processes that people are undergoing, and how that might relate to the outcome curves. We could ask, how could we learn faster? What is the optimal configuration of a learning health system? But it's not so simple, actually, because if you think of each of these organizations as complex systems, there are many factors that determine effectiveness. If you're a decision maker, should you invest in data infrastructure or community organizing? Right? If you're a researcher, what are the comparator arms or the dosage in a prospective trial to improve outcomes? We don't know this yet. In fact, we say, okay, here's 6 sets of things to do. Go do them all as hard as you can. that may or may not be the best thing to do. It's probably not the most efficient way of doing it. So we developed an agent-based model, computer simulation of a learning health system. Agent-based models are computer programs in which artificial agents, in this case doctors and patients, are spawned into the silica, into the universe, and they interact based on a set of rules and within an environment specified by us. So we can model what the sort of idealized, abstracted learning health, use it as a thinking prosthesis. When we say, for example, you need to have people who are engaged, you have to be able to code engagement. So that means you have to think very clearly about what you mean by engagement. We talk about improvement. What do we mean improvement? You have to be able to code that. But by developing a model like this, perhaps it makes it easier to select better tests to run. The learning health networks are very large, and we have many hundreds, maybe even thousands of potential interventions and sets of interventions that we could do. We can't test them all in vivo, like in the real world. But if we can simulate this, we can maybe come up with better tests to run. I'll show you briefly how we did a very early computation on face validity of this. We translated the theoretical elements of of a learning health system into the change concepts, and then represented in this model, and then kind of did a sort of toy run that looks like this. Okay, so if we have more and more involved people creating and sharing information and knowledge and know-how for making better decisions, that will allow more people to get what is needed and when it's needed, and to act in ways to improve health and healthcare. So in the model, we said, all right, we're going to have we have a parameter for how much patients influence others. That affects the population. That increases the availability of shared knowledge, and that increases outcomes. And then I don't probably have time to actually go into all of these, but I will say that when we ran the model, various conditions, we varied the first parameter, how much patients influence others, and we multiplied it by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and we divided by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 up to 10. The multiplications are, that's the divisions are red dots. So here's patients influencing more, patients influencing less. So we looked at patients influence, we showed that as we increase patient influence or decrease it, we had an effect on patient population, patient activation. As we had more patient activation, we had more shared knowledge. As we had more shared knowledge, we had better outcomes. And here's the box and whisker plot for increased and decreased patient influence. A long way of saying that we think that the model has some face and computational validity. So what did we learn? We learned that health systems are complex social systems, that we can focus on changing the system, not the people. And complex systems change when the interaction between the parts change. So in order to change this complex system, we need to make it easier to co-produce, make it easier to interact in this way of producing together. We have a general approach for doing this that is about more shared purpose, shared resources, shared processes. And over time, we've also learned leading complex system change is about being more of a gardener than a foreman. Right? You're planting seeds, you're watering, you're not telling people, you go do this. You're making it possible for the people to go and do this. It's more of a compass and less of a map. There are no like hard and fast rules. You have to sense and know and be able to relate to your context to what you need to do next. And it's important to enable others to act under conditions of uncertainty. But of course, more research is necessary. And this is my last bit. There is NCATS has a translational science spectrum from basic research to public health. We can think of our own work as a translational spectrum for learning health system science. And I invite you to join us. We have a huge laboratory, and we'd love to have people help with this because we can't do it all by ourselves. So that is the end, and I can try to stop sharing.
Really interesting talk, Michael. Thank you very much. I wanted to see if anybody has any questions for our presenter today. Lots of you are on the call or on the Zoom, so if you do, just pipe up. I can't see when hands are raised. And I do have a question. I'm really struck with, I think, the central tenet of what you were talking about, which is making sure you establish a shared purpose, a shared process, set of processes, and shared resources.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, and you're talking about with your learning health networks, these are many or multiple organizations, but even within the context of our organization, there could be multiple units that are having to come together. How do you actually come together to establish a shared process and purposes and resources? And is there a mechanism to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we call it a design process, but essentially we realized that because we have to have everybody involved, we have to have not only the clinicians, but also the patient and the parents and the researchers and the administrators all involved. We bring them all together to actually talk through what it is that they want to achieve, and it's an interesting process. It and a social process. It feels like, of course, we all know what we're after. We're after better health. Okay, so define for me better health. Well, it's this. Oh, no, it's not. It's that, right? And health is one thing, but what about, being able to live, right? I want to live to be. I want to be healthy to live, not live to be healthy. And then that takes a little while. And then the question is, well, okay, so if we, the model for improvement. So that's what we want to change. How would we measure it? Well, it's lung function or health-related quality of life. And then what are some things that we are doing that could actually improve this? And how would those things fit together? The aha moment for us was that there are a lot of people with a lot of ideas, but you have to involve them. I think we talk about engaging patients and we talk about patient-centered care, but what we're not often working with them. We're still working for them a lot of times. We talk about them. We try to help them. We try to do for them. If you can't do surgery on yourself, but you really have to invite people into the process. Can I respond to questions? Do you have?
Yes, please go ahead with the chat. Yes, that's what's in the chat.
Yeah, you have specific tools and measures for engagement, awareness, participation, contribution, ownership. So Joyce, thanks. That is the article that I shared, and I can share the slides, Allison, if you want. I can make those available.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that talks about we actually used behavioral indicators to map to these different levels of engagement rather than a survey. We wanted to see the behaviors, and there's more in that article. What Rangbin asked, which software which software do you use to build your agent-based models? It's actually it's Python and R, and it's not NetLogo or the packaged ones. We're working with a programmer and model developer. That is also in the article that we published on that. Joyce said, I love the inclusion of the ostomy toolkit. Yeah, it's one of the things that was interesting. Jenny and Sammy published that ostomy toolkit in pediatrics. They were the first and second authors. They were kind enough to invite us to contribute as authors. And the first review, the reviewer said, "Well, you said you had patients on here, but who are the patients?" They are the people who wrote this. So it was like, it's a profound shift in mindset. Pat said, more of a gardener than a foreman. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my favorite phrase, and sort of takeaway from this is reminding us of that. And then Eric, why do you calculate the patient X or the patient times doctor interaction as being the multiplication of probabilities? Yeah. Couldn't they be additive or at least complementary?
Yeah.
And I would add on to Eric's question, what about other healthcare providers, and how do you include that into the equations as well?
Yeah, so this was the original argument, right? My provocation at the beginning, 0.5 times 0.5 equals 0.25. You could add those together. I was thinking of, the odds of, or the, if we only get half the care that you need, and then you only get do half of the care, half of the things that you need to stay healthy, that multiply together, that's 0.25. It is additive. You could do different things. I was being intentionally provocative just to get people, but I mean, oftentimes, it's in front of an audience that isn't thinking about improving healthcare systems, and they need to be sort of shaken up a bit. It's scary to think that healthcare is not what we imagine it to be. So, but I appreciate the comment.
Any other questions for our speaker or comments in the chat? Speak up. Well, there is a lot of interest in this topic. And so absolutely, if you're willing to share your slides, I can send them out to the group here or to folks who signed up. We would love that. Yeah.
Happy to do so. And I'll include my email on there. Feel free to follow up. Like I said, it takes everybody to change the healthcare system, but it also takes everybody to figure out how to change the healthcare system. So I'm always looking for for collaborators.
Wonderful.
Yes, disruption.
All right, disruption, yes. All right. Well, thanks again, much appreciated, and we'll be in touch. And yes, thanks. This is great, great presentation.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.